Father, mother, and son married each other, the sickest family triangle ever documented in the USA, deep in the rugged Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia. There once existed a valley so secluded that locals called it the Forgotten Hollow. It was here, shielded from the eyes of mainstream America throughout the late 1940s to early 1970s, that the most disturbing family arrangement in American history took root and flourished for nearly 3 decades. Our investigation begins in April 1972, when county social worker Margaret Holloway ventured into this isolated community following reports of unusual family structures that had persisted for generations. What she discovered would shock the nation and forever change how we understand the devastating consequences of genetic isolation. The Caldwell family lived at the end of a winding dirt road in a weathered farmhouse surrounded by dense forest. 3 individuals, Robert Caldwell, 49, his wife Martha, 47, and their son James, 28, claimed to be legally married to each other in various combinations, creating what locals quietly referred to as the Triangle. "I'll never forget the moment I stepped onto that property," Margaret recalled in her recently unsealed testimony from 1973. "There was something immediately unsettling about how they interacted, like watching a distorted mirror of family life." Court records reveal that Robert had married Martha in 1944 when she was just 19. They had a son, James, in 1944. What happened next defied all social norms and legal boundaries. When James turned 18 in 1962, Martha divorced Robert and legally married her own son in a neighboring county where officials didn't recognize the connection. 2 years later, in an even more shocking development, Robert and James formed their own legally recognized union in yet another jurisdiction. The family maintained these 3-way relationships openly within their isolated community, where generations of intermarriage had normalized such arrangements. Documents from the county clerk's office show at least 7 other families in the Hollow had similar, though less complex, consanguineous relationships dating back to the 1880s. The physical consequences of generations of genetic isolation were immediately apparent. James exhibited distinct facial asymmetry, with one eye positioned significantly lower than the other. His sister cousin's children from other consanguineous relationships in the Hollow showed similar traits: unusually close-set eyes, disproportionate limbs, and severely compromised cognitive development. Dr. Howard Reynolds, who conducted medical examinations on the Hollow's residents in 1973, noted, "The genetic degradation was unlike anything I'd seen in my 30 years of practice. Multiple recessive genetic disorders appeared simultaneously in these individuals, creating health complications that modern medicine wasn't equipped to address. The psychological impact was equally devastating." Martha's personal diaries, discovered during the investigation, revealed a woman trapped in a generational cycle she couldn't escape. "The walls of this valley are all I know," she wrote in 1968. "Outside is another world that would never understand our ways. But inside is a prison of our own making." The discovery of the Caldwell family triangle sent shockwaves through American society when it became public in late 1973. It prompted immediate legislative action across multiple states to prevent marriage registry loopholes and strengthen laws against consanguineous relationships. Check if you're already subscribed to this channel. You won't find these shocking, real-life cases of hidden American history anywhere else, stories that mainstream media is too afraid to tell you about. The Caldwell family's disturbing arrangement didn't develop in isolation. Historical records and church registries from the late 1800s reveal that their valley community had been practicing various forms of consanguineous relationships for at least 5 generations. The Hollow's first settlers, 3 related families who arrived in 1842, had intentionally chosen this location for its remoteness. County census data from 1850 shows the original settlers included the Caldwells, Millers, and Prestons, all sharing grandparents from an earlier generation. Their deliberate isolation was partly motivated by religious beliefs that outsiders characterized as cultish, emphasizing blood purity and rejection of outside influence. These communities didn't develop their practices overnight, explains Dr. Eleanor Matthews, historian specializing in Appalachian cultural development. The extreme geographical isolation combined with economic hardship created conditions where marriage options became increasingly limited with each generation. By 1900, church records indicate that 78% of marriages within the Hollow were between first or second cousins. By 1950, this figure had risen to 93%, with several cases of uncle-niece and aunt-nephew relationships documented. The Caldwell Triangle represented the most extreme manifestation of this generational pattern. The genetic consequences became increasingly severe with each generation. Medical records from a traveling doctor who visited the Hollow in 1962 described children with profound developmental disabilities, unusual facial features, and significantly shortened lifespans. Many died before reaching adulthood, suffering from heart defects, kidney malformations, and compromised immune systems. James Caldwell's medical evaluation from 1973 revealed he had the cognitive development of a 12-year-old despite being 28. His physical examination documented 6 fingers on his left hand, severe scoliosis, and a heart murmur consistent with septal defects. Most concerningly, genetic testing available at that time suggested high levels of homozygosity, identical genetic material inherited from related parents. Dr. Reynolds's report stated, "What we're witnessing is the collapse of genetic diversity. Each generation compounds the previous genetic abnormalities while introducing new ones. If this community had remained undiscovered for another generation, we likely would have seen even more profound deformities incompatible with life." The Caldwell family produced 4 children from their various relationships. These children, whose exact parentage remained deliberately obscured in the family's records, exhibited the most severe consequences of multi-generational inbreeding. 2 died in infancy from congenital heart defects. The remaining 2, Sarah 11 and Thomas 8, were immediately placed in state care upon discovery. Sarah couldn't speak and required constant care for seizures and respiratory difficulties. Thomas, though able to communicate in simple sentences, had profound physical deformities, including fused fingers and severely bowed legs that limited mobility. Their medical records from the Children's Hospital in Charleston documented over 14 distinct genetic disorders between them. These children represent the culmination of generations of genetic isolation, noted Dr. Catherine Winters, pediatrician who treated them. Their conditions weren't just the result of their immediate family situation, but of decades of accumulated genetic damage that simply couldn't be undone. The Hollow contained 37 residents when discovered in 1972. Genetic testing revealed that despite appearing to be distinct family units, the entire community essentially shared the genetic equivalent of being siblings or first cousins. The average coefficient of relationship was estimated at 0.38, nearly 8 times higher than what would be considered concerning in mainstream medical genetics. Martha's journal entries from 1965 show she was aware of the consequences. Another child born today to the Prestons. It didn't cry, right? Its little hands weren't formed like they should be. We all pretend not to notice these things happening more and more with each baby born to the Hollow. The social structure that enabled and maintained these relationships was perhaps even more disturbing than the relationships themselves. Court testimonies and interviews with Hollow residents revealed an elaborate system of rules, justifications, and power dynamics that had evolved over generations to normalize what the outside world considered unconscionable. Robert Caldwell emerged as the Hollow's de facto leader through the 1960s, maintaining control through a combination of charismatic authority, isolation, and fear. Former residents described how he controlled access to the single radio that connected them to the outside world, filtering and interpreting information to reinforce the community's practices. Robert would gather everyone on Sunday evenings to listen to news broadcasts, explained David Preston, one of the few Hollow residents who later integrated into mainstream society. He'd explain how the outside world was becoming increasingly immoral and dangerous, and how our way of life preserved something pure and ancient. Martha's role in the triangle revealed the complex power dynamics at play. Her personal writings, spanning 3 decades, showed a woman who initially resisted the community's practices but gradually became one of their strongest defenders. By the time she married her son James, she had fully embraced the Hollow's justifications. In a particularly disturbing entry from 1963, Martha wrote, "James understands our ways now. Robert has taught him well. The 3 of us complete each other in ways outsiders could never understand. Their laws aren't God's laws. Their science isn't our truth." James himself, interviewed in 1975 after receiving psychological treatment, provided chilling insight into how these beliefs were passed to the next generation. "From my earliest memories, I was taught that our family was special, chosen to preserve something precious. I never questioned marrying my mother. It seemed like the natural progression, like seasons changing. The community maintained its isolation through a complex system of lookouts and warnings. Children were taught from an early age to hide when vehicles approached. Interactions with outsiders were strictly controlled and limited to Robert and 2 other community elders who would travel to nearby towns for supplies. School attendance laws were circumvented through a rudimentary home education system that focused primarily on the community's religious texts and practical skills. None of the children could read beyond a basic level, and mathematics was limited to simple addition and subtraction needed for farming. I want to hear from you in the comments. If you were the social worker who discovered this community, would you have reported it immediately or tried to understand it first? Type I would report it if you believe immediate intervention was necessary. The investigation revealed that the Hollow operated under its own justice system. Disobedience was punished through shunning, physical correction, or in severe cases, expulsion, a virtual death sentence for individuals with no education or understanding of the outside world. Between 1950 and 1970, records indicate 7 individuals were expelled, never to be heard from again. Perhaps most disturbing was how the community justified its practices. They had developed an elaborate religious framework that reinterpreted biblical passages to support consanguineous relationships. Their handwritten religious texts, seized during the investigation, contained elaborate genealogies tracing their practices back to purported ancient traditions. They weren't simply ignorant people who didn't know any better, noted Dr. Samuel Hoffman, psychologist who evaluated several community members. They had constructed an entire alternative moral framework that inverted mainstream values. Within their system, what we consider abhorrent was celebrated as the highest virtue. The Hollow's residents exhibited complex reactions when confronted by authorities. Some, particularly younger members, showed immediate relief at intervention. Others responded with fear or hostility. Most disturbing were those who genuinely couldn't comprehend why their way of life was problematic. Martha Caldwell reportedly asked investigators, "How can love between family be wrong when it's the strongest love there is?" This question revealed the fundamental distortion at the heart of the community's belief system, the inability to distinguish between familial affection and romantic attachment. When authorities finally intervened in 1973, they faced the enormous challenge of integrating Hollow residents into mainstream society. Adults who had never known any other reality struggled with basic social norms. Children placed in foster care exhibited attachment disorders and profound confusion about appropriate boundaries. The discovery of the Caldwell family triangle in 1973 created unprecedented legal challenges. No existing statutes adequately addressed the complexity of their situation. Prosecutors struggled to determine appropriate charges while considering the community's extreme isolation and limited understanding of mainstream norms. Robert Caldwell faced the most serious legal consequences. Court records show he was charged with multiple counts related to creating and maintaining the Hollow's social structure. His defense claimed he was simply continuing traditions established generations before him. But prosecutors presented evidence that he had deliberately expanded and intensified these practices. During his trial in November 1973, Robert remained unrepentant. "You judge us by your laws, but we answer to higher authorities," he told the court, according to transcripts. "For 6 generations, we have preserved what the outside world has forgotten. Your intervention has destroyed something ancient and pure." Martha's legal situation proved more complex. Psychological evaluations suggested she had been indoctrinated from childhood and potentially lacked the capacity to have made informed choices. Her attorneys presented her as simultaneously perpetrator and victim, someone who had internalized the Hollow's distorted values through lifelong conditioning. During her testimony, Martha appeared genuinely confused by the proceedings. "I did what my mother did and her mother before her," she stated. "No one ever told us there was another way to live." Her comments revealed how completely normalized these practices had become within their isolated community. James presented the greatest challenge to the legal system. Having been born into this environment and subjected to its indoctrination from birth, questions arose about his culpability. Extensive psychological evaluations revealed significant cognitive impairment resulting from genetic factors, further complicating legal proceedings. Judge William Harrington, who presided over the main cases, noted in his ruling, "Our legal system assumes individuals have reasonable opportunity to understand societal norms. The residents of this Hollow have existed entirely outside those norms for generations. This presents profound questions about justice that our current frameworks aren't equipped to address." The legal proceedings generated national attention and prompted legislative changes across multiple states. By 1975, 17 states had strengthened laws regarding consanguineous relationships and implemented new regulations for marriage license verification. West Virginia specifically created new statutes addressing isolated communities and mandatory reporting requirements. Child custody proceedings proved equally challenging. Sarah and Thomas Caldwell, along with 11 other children from the Hollow, became wards of the state. Their profound physical and developmental needs overwhelmed existing foster care systems. Special accommodations had to be created, straining already limited resources. The Hollow itself became subject to legal battles over land ownership. Historical records revealed the original deeds from 1842 had never been properly registered. The families had lived on the land for generations without paying taxes or obtaining updated titles. This complicated efforts to determine the community's future. Robert ultimately received a 15-year sentence for his role in maintaining the community's practices. Martha was sentenced to psychiatric care rather than prison, with the court recognizing her diminished capacity. James was deemed incompetent to stand trial and committed to a state institution where he remained until his death in 1981 from complications related to congenital heart defects. Legal scholars continued to cite the Caldwell cases when discussing the intersection of cultural isolation, cognitive capacity, and legal responsibility. Harvard law professor Elizabeth Montgomery noted in her 1985 analysis, "The Caldwell cases forced our legal system to confront its assumptions about universal moral knowledge. Can individuals be held fully accountable for violating norms they were systematically taught didn't apply to them?" The discovery of the Caldwell family and their isolated community permanently changed how America understood genetic isolation and its consequences. The case became a watershed moment in genetics research, social work practices, and public health interventions in remote communities. Medical researchers from Johns Hopkins University conducted extensive studies on the Hollow's former residents between 1975 and 1980. Their findings, published in the American Journal of Human Genetics, documented the most comprehensive evidence to date of recessive genetic disorders resulting from consanguinity. The Caldwell study became required reading for medical students specializing in genetic disorders. Dr. Michael Bernstein, who led the research team, explained, "What we observed in the Hollow residents represented multiple overlapping genetic disorders that had accumulated over generations. In some individuals, we identified as many as 7 distinct recessive conditions that would be extremely rare in the general population." The children born in the Hollow who survived into adulthood faced enormous challenges integrating into mainstream society. Follow-up studies conducted in 1990 showed that of the 14 children removed from the community, only 3 achieved independent living. The remainder required ongoing support for physical disabilities, cognitive impairments, or psychological trauma. Sarah Caldwell, who defied medical expectations by surviving to adulthood, granted a rare interview in 1992 at age 30. Living in a specialized care facility, she had learned basic communication through adaptive technology despite her significant limitations. "I know I'm different," she stated through her communication device, "but I'm glad I got to see the world outside the Hollow." Thomas Caldwell, after multiple surgeries and years of physical therapy, gained limited mobility. He completed a modified high school education and eventually worked in a sheltered workshop. His case managers noted his remarkable resilience despite the circumstances of his birth and early childhood. The Caldwell case fundamentally changed social work practices in rural America. New protocols were established for identifying and intervening in isolated communities. Training programs now specifically address the signs of genetic isolation and consanguineous relationships. Regular wellness checks became mandated for children in remote areas who weren't enrolled in public schools. The site of the Hollow itself underwent a dramatic transformation. After lengthy legal proceedings, the land was eventually acquired by the state in 1979. Today, it houses the Appalachian Center for Genetic Education, a research and educational facility dedicated to studying the effects of genetic isolation and developing interventions for at-risk communities. Visitors to the center can view preserved structures from the original community alongside modern exhibits explaining the science of genetic diversity and its importance for population health. The center's mission statement acknowledges its disturbing origins while emphasizing its commitment to preventing similar situations through education and outreach. Perhaps the most significant legacy of the Caldwell case has been its impact on public awareness. What was once a taboo subject discussed only in hushed tones became part of educational curricula and public health campaigns. Schools now teach the importance of genetic diversity, and public health initiatives specifically target isolated communities with information about genetic health. Martha Caldwell spent her final years in a psychiatric care facility, where she gradually gained insight into the true nature of her family's situation. Nursing staff reported that before her death in 1989, She had come to understand the harm that had been perpetuated through generations. Her final journal entry, now preserved in the Appalachian Center's archives, reads, "I see now what was taken from us, the chance to know better, to be better. May no child ever again grow up as we did, believing darkness is light." Robert Caldwell never acknowledged the harm caused by the Hollows' practices. He died in prison in 1983, still maintaining that the outside world had destroyed something valuable. His prison writings reveal a man incapable of recognizing the suffering his beliefs had caused. The genetic legacy of the Caldwell family continues today. Researchers have identified over 200 individuals in surrounding counties who carry genetic markers traced back to the Hollows' original families. Public health officials actively monitor these populations for recessive disorders, offering genetic counseling and testing. If you've watched until here, it's because you connected with this powerful story. Leave a comment saying I watched until the end, so I can get to know you and learn who truly appreciates the in-depth investigations on this channel. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. These hidden histories of America deserve to be told, and your support makes it possible. Like and share this video to help others understand these critical chapters of our past that shaped modern genetic science and social policy. The Caldwell family triangle stands as one of the most disturbing chapters in American history, a stark reminder of how isolation, misinformation, and generational patterns can create unimaginable suffering. Yet from this darkness came important advances in how we understand genetics, community intervention, and the fundamental human need for connection beyond family boundaries. As we continue to discover isolated communities in remote regions of America even today, the lessons of the Caldwell case remain vitally important. Their story reminds us that vigilance, education, and compassion are our best tools against the recurrence of such tragedy.